All right, so I'm here with Caitlin and Alan and a special guest, Mack Flavelle. We're here with another Infosec Decoded, this one titled COVID All Gone. But the first thing I want to do is talk to Mack, and because you did, I see you co-founded Dapper Labs and you created the concept of CryptoKitties. And now you have your own NFT studio, the Big Head Club. So why don't you tell us about it? I'd like to hear more about how CryptoKitties came about. You know, I own some CryptoKitties. I don't know where they are, but maybe they're worth something by now.
Maybe. Hopefully they brought you joy and curiosity along the way. And there's value.
Oh yeah, I gave them away to students for prizes and taught them about the blockchain and stuff. It was good.
CryptoKitties came about because in 2017 I was working at a company called Axiom Zen, and my boss, who lucky for me was my friend, was named Roham, and he said to me, I need you to go ahead and make the blockchain fun. It is the summer of blockchain and you need to make this fun. And I said, that's an absolutely stupid idea. Nobody likes the blockchain except weirdos that want to take down governments and banks, and we are not those people. So why would we do that? And he said, it's cute that you have an opinion, but you should shut up and do your job. And so I did, and I went and thought about it for a while. And I came back and I said, I like CryptoPunks. I saw a CryptoPunk for the first time, and I bought one of those that looked like Wonder Woman because I'm a big fan of Wonder Woman. And I wanted to make a gardening game that had always been a thing for me that I failed to do to this day. And I knew that cats were the gasoline of the internet. So I put those things together and I said to the team, gang, I have a problem. We need to make cats have sex in order to mine Bitcoin. And one of my coworkers was named Dieter, and he said, that is a completely nonsensical statement, but I could create a new proposal for a standard on Ethereum, and that would enable you to do what you want to do. And also, because it's the standard, enable other people to leverage some of the ideas that we're discussing here. And so I usually tell people that I'm the problem that led to the 721, not the solution, not nearly smart enough to be the solution. And then we spent 3 or 4 months and built CryptoKitties and kind of changed everything as a result of that.
Yeah, I was very impressed with CryptoKitties, and I took it as a counterexample for the blockchain because as soon as it got popular, it froze the Ethereum blockchain to where you couldn't send anything around. And I said, that's still the problem to this day. The Ethereum blockchain is only strong enough to make a prototype. And when you actually roll out major production, it can't handle the traffic, although supposedly Ethereum 2 will help.
Maybe. I do not pretend to know about these things. I've been hearing about Ethereum 2 since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. And
Yeah.
so I've stopped trying to predict the future. I'm along for the ride. If Ethereum 2 makes Ethereum work really well, that's awesome. If not, people will find other ways to create and trade and play.
Well, there are alternatives like Solana and Avalanche and stuff. Where are your NFTs for the Big Head Club? Are they on the Ethereum blockchain still?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of mimicking success, and sometimes that surprises people because we've had a couple boundary pushing successes that were not mimicry, but I'm a big fan of mimicking other people's success. And when people tell me that I should build on another chain, my usual response is, who am I copying? Whose success am I going to copy? And there's not a lot of success on other chains to point to. That's not to say that there won't be, just that I don't need to be the first to prove any of those. I would rather somebody else blaze the trail, Lewis and Clark, that motherfucker, and I will come down the river later.
You sound like a manager. This is the way like business managers think.
Well, yeah, I do have to run a business. On top of everything else that I do have a business to run and some people to employ and the future to preserve. And so these are the factors of what we do.
No, I got a lot of sympathy with the manager's position. I was just talking to Caitlin about a few days ago about how Tesla, the original Tesla, Nikolai, he got a bunch of investors to invest in him building a radio. And then halfway through, he decided, oh no, I've detected signals from Mars. And he spent all the money detecting signals from Mars. And I said, he needed like an MBA on the team. He needed somebody to say, all right, I know you're a genius, but we ought to just do what we promised to do and make some money.
Yeah, I mean, historically, I am more of the Tesla figure than the NBA figure. But when you start these companies, and like I said, you have employees and you have people who've collected your NFTs, and you have a responsibility to all sorts of other people, then one must make decisions accordingly.
So what do your NFTs look like? Can you show us some of them? 'Cause I've seen,
Uh, I should I screen share? Should I
sure,
just put
sure.
you to somewhere
Yeah,
else?
just share your screen. Show us what you got. I'd like to see them because, I judge some of these. I'm a complete outsider, but a lot of them are selling things that don't look any good. And I wonder,
Uh, One, I would suggest that in many cases, people are not buying the NFTs because they look good. There are other
apparently
compelling
not.
motivations.
Apparently they're just hoping
Uh,
the price will go up anyway.
yeah, there's many people who are buying NFTs hoping the price will go up. That is not my enthusiasm. I like the art. I don't care about the community. I don't care about the utility. I usually don't care about the price. I just like the
Oh,
art.
well, then I want to see the art.
Screen sharing is disabled by the host.
Well, I have to fix it. Why, thank you. Or go ahead.
Let's try this. My favorite right now of ours is Oni Ronin. These ones thrill and delight me. So turns out that in order for a samurai to live well, they needed to die well. And
Oh,
part of the act of dying well was writing a haiku at your death. And the best you could do was write your final haiku the moment before you died, as the blade that was to behead you fell from the sky. But sometimes that was not the case. It happened, decades beforehand or whatever. But I heard that story and I got very excited. And so we made Oni Ronin, which are demonic Ronin NFTs. And this is what the Oni Ronin look like, this big guy here.
oh,
So these are 8 months old. I am reasonably sure that there's nothing like this. These are the Fallen Ronin. I'm reasonably sure there's nothing like this in NFTs. And so you get your Oni Ronin. There's 8,888. They're procedurally generated. They're all 3D models like this. They're absolutely bonkers. And then you can send it to the Trial of Ascension. And that is our bravery mechanic. And at the Trial of Ascension, you will either get one of the 88 golden, or you will get this one back. But in either case, you will get to listen to the death haiku that comes with your Oni Ronin. So every single one of these Oni Ronin has one of 20 possible haiku written by real samurai sometime between 100 and 800 years ago. And you can listen. You know what? I was going to show them to you with the audio on OpenSea, but you won't actually hear it. And so this is my favorite NFT that we've worked on in quite a while. Oh, here's a bunch of them. You can see them down there. My screen has your guys' beautiful faces on it, but they're absolutely strange and bizarre. And these are not PFPs a lot of people find their identity in. One of my favorite projects is called Doodles, and everybody can find a Doodles that looks like them, and they love Doodles. This is not for everybody. There are people who absolutely love these. When you buy an Oni Ronin, we offer Japanese language classes, we offer haiku poetry classes, we offer university professor taught Japanese history classes about late Edo period Japan. Like, there's a ton of stuff that comes with it, but it is definitely not everybody's sense of identity that locks in here. And then on Monday, we're dropping the Kitsune, which are these 9-tailed demonic fox. So if you own an Oni Ronin, you can automatically come claim a Kitsune for free. And that is the golden Ronin. Remember I said that if you send it to the Trial of Ascension, you might get a gold one? These
yeah.
are them. And there's only 11 of those in existence right now. And that's probably my favorite of our NFTs.
Well, that's great. It sounds like it's got game mechanics like CryptoKitties.
It has education components. It has game mechanics built into it. It has exceptional art. We've got interesting things like I showed you the Fallen one, which is what happens if you try and get a Trial of Ascension gold and you miss. So there's actually 10 different shades of the Fallen one. And if you collect all 10 of those and send them to us, then the artist behind the project will make a custom Oni Ronin for people. So we've got 8 people who've done that, and they're collaborating with the artist to create custom art. We have a comic being published by my childhood hero, which we're launching this weekend.
Wow.
And that's really fun and neat and weird. Again, it's important to us that we pay respect to the culture that we are celebrating with these. And so we got the comic written in Japan by Japanese people, in Japanese actually, and then translated to English. And what's important to us is the idea that anything that happens in our narratives or our stories that happens in the real world must be historically accurate. We must pay respect to that. But anything that happens in the Oni realm once they're dead, I mean, it can get crazy, right? You can have a dead Ronin ghost riding a dinosaur. I don't care at that point. And treading that balance has been fun and interesting for us.
Well, it sounds pretty fun. How much does it cost to buy one of these things?
0.0888 ETH. And I don't actually know what the price of ETH is right now, so I don't know.
It's around $1,000, so that's 0.0.
That's like $88.
$88, yeah. Oh, well, that's relatively cheap for an NFT, I think.
Compared to many on the market, yes, it is a reasonable price. But another interesting trend in NFTs right now is free NFTs. Lots of people are doing NFTs that are completely free. They have a high royalty or a high secondary fee, so that if the collection explodes, the creators do well, but you don't have to spend any money to find out. You just go and get the things that you love.
But the Ethereum transaction fee must be something.
Atrocious always, but because everything is down these days, it's actually not as bad as it used to be. But yes, you always must pay the gas. Always.
Yeah. Still, that looks like fun to me. Anybody else have any questions about this? I sort of expected some of these people to have criticism of NFT. When I say things about NFTs, they sneer at me, but you may have intimidated them.
No, this project actually doesn't seem all that bad at all, especially because you're not charging thousands of dollars for these, $80 for a custom designed, piece of art. It isn't too much to ask for at all. So
look at that.
Well, there you go. You passed the acid test.
Thrilled.
Yeah, well, that's pretty fun. And I may dig up my CryptoKitties. CryptoKitties are still going, right?
Yeah, as far as I know, to be honest, I haven't checked in a long time. I, of course, lost the keys to my wallet that had all my hundreds of cats in it.
Oh, you lost them? Yeah, I kind of think I lost mine too. I have like an old computer somewhere. I don't know.
I was very glad that I didn't have my punk in the same wallet, and so I did not lose my punk, but I lost my kitties. But yeah, I think CryptoKitties is going strong and doing well, and they're focused on flow. They made that new blockchain, and they have Top Shot and other big properties to work on. So I'm not sure if CryptoKitties is the center of attention over there, but it is still beloved by a small but loud group of wonderful people.
Yeah, well, that's good. I liked them. And I didn't have to spend very much to get one of them either.
No, they were not unreasonable at first, though they had their moments, certainly.
Yeah. Well, I think those are all the questions I had. I'm glad to see about that project.
Yeah, we love talking about it. Thanks for having me on the show.
Sure. Glad to see you. Okay. Glad to
Have
meet
a good
you.
one.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Well, I think that was fun.
it was fun. I mean, he won me over when he started talking about how, most of the blockchain, it makes no point, and it's like, oh, this person is actually knows what he's talking about, does stuff on the blockchain, and isn't a crazy person. Wow. Okay, let's listen.
That's why I always liked CryptoKitties. It seemed to me to take it about as seriously as it was justified.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, anyway, now we're down to normal news. And my big news, of course, is that COVID's all gone. It's amazing. I wouldn't know, but BART let their mask mandate expire. You don't need to wear a mask on BART anymore. And the CDC has stopped reporting coronavirus cases on cruise ships. So apparently it's all just fine. They just say, oh, talk to your cruise line, and each cruise line will decide what to tell you about the virus on the ship. And that's all the information you need, which was kind of surprising to me. And so anyway, I've of course taken a different attitude. I canceled some of my conference trips, maybe all of them this summer. I'm tired of getting COVID and having my students and everyone get sick with COVID at the conferences. But anyway, and I found a interesting Twitter thread from a guy that says there is a new version coming, BA 2.75, which is 2 to 4 times more infectious than BA5, which is already the current one that is insanely infectious. So in the real world, COVID is blazing like mad, and the wastewater is very high, and people are getting infected right and left. But 90% of the people around me and authority figures all seem to have decided it's over, and we're just going to pretend there's no problem. So it's it's kind of putting the kibosh on a bunch of Democrats that said, those Republicans had no respect for scientific truth, but we Democrats, we follow the science. And I said, well, I'm not noticing that so much. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say about COVID. And Alan has got the trafficking victims forced to perpetrate scams.
Yeah, this is a very long article from Vice World News written by Alistair McCready. It's a very disturbing story about scam call centers in Southeast Asia. And we've heard all about the scam centers in India. Those seem to get most of the attention. They've certainly been the most active in the US in the past decade. But apparently, unknown to me until reading this article, the real action is in Cambodia and Laos right now. This story it's a harrowing story. It covers some people who got scammed in the US, but also people who were entrapped in these scam call centers in Cambodia. And people were basically trafficked. They were human trafficked. Oftentimes, people are brought in not from Cambodia or Laos, where these call centers are located, but instead from abroad, countries such as Malaysia and the Philippines, or China or Taiwan. And they're lured there on the premise of working at a call center. And during this time, COVID pandemic time, when jobs are scarce, a lot of people got suckered into this, and they arrive only to be transported to an unknown location, to have their passport taken away from them, to be beaten, to be tasered, and in some cases even to be killed. And so it appears that there's a very large scale organized crime syndicate or syndicates that are involved in this scam. The mechanics of it are very familiar. Romance scams, cryptocurrency, just transferring funds, victims getting scammed out of hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. That part's a well-worn playbook. But what's different about these scam centers is the scale and the way they're set up. Whereas scam centers in India, at their very largest, to my knowledge, would be only maybe a few hundred or several hundred employees, all of whom were willing to work there. These scam call centers in Cambodia and Laos number in the thousands, several thousand, the largest being 8,000, most of whom are there unwillingly and are essentially imprisoned and trafficked there. In some cases, even being sold from one scam center, call center to another. And so this article goes into great depth about how these are set up, where they're located. Many of these scam call centers were formerly casinos and resorts in special economic zones in Cambodia and Laos in particular, but also somewhat in Myanmar and Vietnam. Not Vietnam. But when the pandemic happened, they suddenly lost all their tourists and they lost all their gamblers. So they had to find some other thing to do with all this space. And apparently the answer was to turn to these scam centers. There were a few scam call centers that predated the pandemic, but at least in Southeast Asia, they really exploded after the pandemic took off. And so most of these outfits are only a few years old. Initially, they targeted targets in China and Taiwan, and then they expanded out to Japan and Singapore and Malaysia. Now, in the past 9 months, they've expanded out to the US and Europe. So these are really, really large scale operations that probably have a competitive advantage over the Indian scam call centers. So it's a complex situation involving political corruption, organized crime, and human trafficking, and of course, willing victims or unwilling victims all around the world. And it'll be very interesting to see how this develops in the future. Oh, Sam, your microphone's off.
Thank you. I think it points out something that people often overlook is they get angry at people trying to scam them online without realizing that the person at the other end might very well just be a victim too.
Yeah, and that's just the thing. There are some non-governmental organizations that are trying to help people who are caught up in these call centers to escape. And they do so at considerable personal risk, escaping these. Many of these compounds have armed guards. They have prison rooms, so to speak. People are, if they try to escape, they're beaten severely and tased. So yeah, people who try to escape these face very severe punishment. And these good Samaritans who are trying to help these trafficked people sometimes are subject to lawsuits by the scammers themselves. So yeah,
It's quite, I know there's a lot of do-gooders charge into foreign nations and try to help and just end up making things worse.
yes, well, some of the do-gooders in this case actually are former scam center employees themselves, or workers
Well, then
themselves.
hopefully they will at least understand the system.
Yes, somewhat better, better. But ultimately, if the governments of Laos and Cambodia were interested in cracking down on this, they could do so. But the politicians and police are in their pocket, so to speak. And as I said earlier, many of these centers exist in special economic zones, which have a degree of autonomy from the countries in which they're located.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the Mexican drug cartels.
There are elements of that, yes.
And I do want to point out that the vast majority of calls, at least that I've seen in the United States, are coming from India. And in India, as Alan mentioned, these they do volunteer. I mean, they're not there by force. I haven't seen any indication of anyone in India so far. It might exist, but the vast majority of cases in India, it is people just wanting to get rich quick and getting hired and trying to rip people off. But of course, that's not the case for the rest of the world.
Yeah. All right. And so Caitlin's got Meta.
Yeah, so there's a company called Meta, which is different from Facebook Meta. And this Meta has, it basically sells art installations. And so Meta, the art installation, is suing Meta, the former Facebook company, because of the name Meta, because the art installation company had the name Meta before Meta. And now they're saying that the name Meta is now ruined because of Meta. So,
Well, of course. So it seems like, is Facebook going to crush them like a bug with a ton of
yes,
higher priced lawyers and just take it?
yes, they will crush the Meta art installation company with with no holds barred lawyering and fierce determination. So,
Or, if they felt like being nice, they could just buy the trademark off them. But anyway,
no.
yeah, that would be out of character.
Yeah, no, apparently meta.is, which is the art installation company, is pretty well known. Like, it's not a minor art installation company.
Mhm.
It's been around for a while, and it's used by a lot of large companies to like fill their workspaces with art and stuff. So
Yeah.
it's definitely not it's not someone that came along and realized that the Meta name wasn't trademarked yet, and is just doing stuff. No, that they do have a legit argument that Meta just sort of came and took Meta's name and is.
Well, then hopefully they can win some award in court to make up for it or something.
Hopefully.
All right. And so I was very interested to see this article on Slate from Kari Seister and Wendy Sheldon, talking about something I was not aware of, which is that in the 1800s, women took something called period pills, period herbs. And so they would not find out if they were pregnant. Just if they're late on their period, they would take special herbs to make their period come. And there are pills, you can get them now, and they consist of similar drugs as the chemical abortion drugs. But the point is, if you do it that way, you never take a pregnancy test. You never really know you were pregnant. It's just to make your period stay on time. It's period regularization is the way they treat it. And this is an interesting idea. They say something like 70% of women going in for abortions say if this was an option, they would rather just do that. And I wonder if it would count legally as an abortion. It might be legal in the red states and all that. It does seem like an alternative to consider, and it is available now in some states, and they're trying to bring it back. And this seems like a pretty good idea to me in this world of Gilead, where women can't get abortions legally. Anyway, then Alan's got the Vault 7 hacker.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, we talked about Vault 7 and the article in the New Yorker about Joshua Shulte, the formerly accused ex-CIA employee, accused of leaking CIA tools, and he has now been convicted. He was found guilty on 9 counts, all of the most serious counts that he was facing, including leaking the very sensitive tools, compromising national security, etc. So he has not yet been sentenced, but he's looking at up to 80 years in prison just for these 9 counts relating to espionage and national security. He's still yet to face trial for charges of possession of child sexual exploitation imagery and also sexual assault. So he may well be in prison for the rest of his life a few times over.
Sounds like it. Yeah, all right. And Caitlin's got TikTok.
Let's talk about TikTok for a little bit. So this is something that always interested me ever since TikTok became popular. So Malware Labs has an article talking about how the FCC has deemed TikTok an unacceptable security risk. Now, when TikTok became popular, I was working with the government, and I knew that it came from a big Chinese firm, and that I was very cognizant of the supply chain issues involved here, that this Chinese company would be taking data from what is essentially a government contractor, US government contractor, and creating profiles on me, which could then be harvested by the, Chinese government. And that's kind of scary. Now, not all governments outside the US are to be mistrusted, of course. Like, if, Denmark or the UK made TikTok, I'm not particularly worried they're going to do anything malicious with that data. But when we're talking about the Chinese Communist Party, it becomes much more iffy that this data is going essentially straight to the Communist Party in China.
Yeah.
And it's unclear about how much data is being, used and harvested exactly. I imagine it's a lot like Facebook, but of course the difference between Facebook and TikTok is that there's a clear separation, or there's supposed to be a clear separation between the government and Facebook or Meta, right? And that's not the case with something like TikTok. So I'm actually really surprised more people aren't, knocking it off their phone, or there isn't just some, US alternative. I know YouTube is doing like YouTube Shorts, but it's not really working out. But it's something that has been on my radar for a while. I've never installed TikTok on my phones, and it doesn't seem to be on many people's radars, but it is kind of a concern. So, and the FCC agrees, and they think it's to be taken off the various app stores.
Yes, and you know who started this all was Donald Trump with exactly this argument.
Yep.
And it's not wrong. I mean, the point is, any Chinese company, they have to hand over anything the government wants to the government. They can't push back against these demands the way you can over here. Yeah. And TikTok seems to have a direct line into controlling people's minds like propaganda. That's its whole feature, is it's hypnotic, and it feeds you stuff, and people really like it and they want to watch more, and the time just vanishes. So it's sort of the most powerful form of like influence.
That's a really good point. I wasn't even thinking about it. I was so focused on the data collection and what China would do with it. But yeah, absolutely, with a system like TikTok or YouTube, where you have control over the algorithm, if you want to instill political dissidence in, let's say, a country that you're antagonistic with, say the United States,
Yeah,
you can maybe recommend a few more QAnon videos to your American audience.
absolutely. You could totally do that. The Russians totally did that. And the Chinese could do that if they wanted to. Yeah. All right. And so this one I thought was amazing. This article on phys.org, where I see a lot of the hard science articles from University of California, San Diego, saying, why did we have grandparents in human families? I wondered this myself. Why should humans live beyond the point of fertility and raising their children? And most animals, it turns out, do not live past the age of menopause, because logically after that point, they serve no more purpose for the survival of the species. And they say this may be a consequence of gonorrhea. Apparently, their research says that normally the brains of old people would decay much faster, but they are protected by an adaptation to cope with gonorrhea. As a side effect of the adaptation of people who can resist gonorrhea better surviving, it also tends to clean up the damage in their brains and make people live longer. So we actually have grandparents. And they say after that, that was perhaps the origin of the mutation that made humans live longer past the age of reproduction. And then perhaps another thing kicked in, as they say now with our complex extended child rearing, it might actually be helpful to have like grandmothers around to help raise the kids. So anyway, I thought it was quite interesting, because that is something that puzzled me as I'm getting old, and I think it's very clear the human body is only designed to last about 30 or 40 years, and beyond that, you're on borrowed time. But it's surprising how far we've been able to push it. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. And Alan has another kind of collie.
Well, just the regular collie, but collie Unkaputbar, which translates to unbreakable.
In what language? German?
German.
Okay.
Very, very German.
Unkaputbar. Actually, that's a great word.
It is. Yeah, it's a great concept too. It's a great one word portmanteau.
It cannot be kaputted.
Yes. But this is a feature in Kali 2022.1 and newer, using ButterFS file system install. And it allows for the most remarkable rollbacks. The way it works is this. If you install, and you must install Kali with ButterFS as the file system, then you can automatically configure these snapshots to be taken. This is just a feature of ButterFS. It's not specific to Kali. It can be used in other distros too. And the ButterFS snapshots will take a snapshot automatically, depending on your configuration, but especially before you do any package updates and installs. And I can attest that this really, really works, because when I installed Kali on an old laptop, it worked fine for the first couple of boots, and then it promptly stopped working for no good reason at all after I'd only installed a few packages. And it was a really bad problem too, because apparently it couldn't even find the kernel. So I didn't bother to troubleshoot that problem. All I did was bring up the snapshotting feature of ButterFS, and I simply reverted back to an earlier snapshot before I made any changes. And lo and behold, it started right up, no more problems. It was right back to the way it should have been, albeit before I had installed those packages. So quite a remarkable feature, and really, really handy if you install Kali on bare metal. If you're doing it in a virtual machine, it doesn't really matter as much. You're probably better off just using the VM snapshots. But if you're doing it on bare metal, it's a tremendous feature.
Yeah, it sounds great. Of course, Windows has had this since Windows ME. But,
yes, right. In some ways, ButterFS is still kind of stuck in beta. And yes, it's maybe not as well developed as VSS is in the Windows world.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm still feeling awfully good about it. It still makes me glad.
I remember when I first started using Linux, I had been, certified in teaching Windows, and I was horrified at how all the fancy repair tools were not there. you're expected to just know how to fix a broken OS, whereas in Windows, there's a bunch of automatic repair tools.
Yeah, there's a lot of Googling. As a now several year user of Ubuntu, which is supposedly one of the more user-friendly distros, I can say that I have spent more time troubleshooting than, well, really than any reasonable person should want to.
That's what Linux is all about. You learn a lot, but yeah, you're playing without any of these handy tools like System Restore.
The training wheels have definitely come off.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to see these training wheels put back on, because I used System Restore all the time back when I was doing Windows maintenance.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed about recent versions of Kali is that they create a very small boot partition, and they don't clean it up. So if there's a big kernel install, the boot partition will sort of fill up, and then the install of the new kernel will fail. And then the install of grub, the new grub stuff will fail as well. And then when you reboot with the new kernel, your system will just fail to boot.
So
Well,
it's
that
not
explains everything. I think that's exactly what must have happened in my case.
man. All right, and Caitlin has the James Webb Telescope.
Yeah, we have some more details about the James Webb Space Telescope. So Engadget has a article written by Estent, good old Estent. So Estent is talking about the hard drive on the James Webb Space Telescope, and it is 68 gigabytes of solid state storage. Now, the article is talking about, oh, it's only 68 gigabytes. Like, what a small amount of storage. I have worked with space hardware. 68 gigabytes in a space satellite is a ton of space on that. They went all out. They put as much hard drive space as they could on this thing. And it all had to be like radiation hardened. So this is not just like, regular SSDs. They just went to Amazon, got an SSD. They got radiation hardened SSDs. They put it on there. And now what's really interesting though, and the reason why I brought this article is that the SSD has a very specific purpose. It's just a giant buffer for the images that come in. So it takes very large images, stores it in raw format, and then when it's time to send it out, it brings it out of the cache and sends it along. Now, one of the things about SSDs, of course, is that they have a limited lifespan. So I'm wondering how many write cycles it can do. And if it's writing that much, it's going to be writing the entire hard drive multiple times a day worth of images. And they must have planned it into the system's life cycle. But I imagine that's going to set a very hard limit. And like I said, I don't know the details of this hardware, so I could be completely wrong, but it could set a very hard limit on how long James Webb could be up there. Unlike the Hubble Space Telescope, which is going strong well after its end of, predicted mission, the James Webb Space Telescope may just go kaput after its mission is over, and we'll just have to put up something new, which is awesome. We totally should. More space telescopes, better, but it does, it'll be interesting to see how this works.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, when I saw that, I saw people paying the same speculation, but it occurred to me, if you had, it could just send the data directly back. It doesn't really need to store it first, right?
It does need to store it because it's on the Deep Space Network, so it doesn't have a constant. It doesn't have a constant bandwidth, and then the images themselves are so high resolution it can't store it all in memory. Now it can, roll back its operations. The problem, of course, is that it's writing to the whole disk, several times a day. That whole disk is just going to sort of fail at once, I imagine. Typically, that's how SSDs, sort of fail in that respect. They kind of work and work and work until, it's been weird leveled to death and no longer works. So, but even if it had partial capacity, they could take fewer pictures.
Yeah.
Now they might be able to rewrite code so they could, take a few, take an image, send it out, take more of the image, send the next line down and stuff like that. And just do, hacks to keep the James Webb Space Telescope working after a decade. But, this is, the telescope is working at its peak right now. So,
right. Well, I think asteroid damage is another thing that's going to limit the lifetime.
And it's very unlikely that the James Webb Space Telescope is going to be hit by a lot of asteroids and,
micrometeorites.
Micrometeorites, yeah.
Already got hit by one, and they said I thought I said there'd be like 30 a year that would hit it.
Yeah, but they're going to be really small. It's unlikely to cause any real damage. And by micro meteorites, they really do mean micro meteorites. Nothing. Low Earth orbiting satellites get hit with much worse. The fact that it's an L2 means that it's actually going to be relatively, relatively unhit. So
Yeah, well, I hope it lasts because I love the pretty pictures.
they are very pretty.
All right. Well, that's it for this one, and we'll be back on Friday.